For those individuals that are just joining us today, good morning and welcome. Our presentation will begin shortly. Just as a housekeeping reminder, all attendees are joining today in a muted status, and this training will be recorded for future reference. Good morning and welcome. It is 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with training today. I'd like to welcome and thank everyone for attending the Making Sense of Loan Forgiveness for the Paycheck Protection Program training this morning. At this point, I'd like to take the opportunity to go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. Debbie Lang, our Chief Credit Officer with Alerus, and myself as Acting as Risk Officer. Just as a few housekeeping reminders, everyone today is joining the session on mute. Debbie, can you do a quick sound check? Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me, Carrie?
Perfect. Thank you, Debbie. Additionally, the session is being recorded and will be provided for all attendees after the conclusion of the training session. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Debbie to start us off.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, and good morning, everyone. And thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'm going to take just a couple minutes to make a few general comments, and then I'm going to hand it back to Carrie. Carrie, whether she wanted to or not, has really become our expert on the PPP program and the forgiveness process over these last several months. And so our plan for today is to have Carrie walk you through the PPP application process and give you some tips on how to fill out your application so you can go ahead and apply for that PPP forgiveness. But before we start doing that, I want to take just a couple of minutes to say, first of all, thank you all for your patience. I think we're all becoming a little bit fatigued by this process. And if you would have joined one of our prior webinars, you would have heard me talk about the fact that there has never been a program or an undertaking anything like the PPP program. We're clearly learning as we go and figuring out things along the way. And I know that's not ideal. That's not how we want to approach things. But that's been true for everybody involved in this process, from Congress in developing the initial concept for this program, to the Treasury and the SBA, who were charged with administering the program, the banks who needed to facilitate getting the funds to all of you, and finally you, our clients. I can only guess how challenging this entire process has been for you. So again, thank you for your patience as we work through this process. I think it's also important to understand that we are not alone in these challenges. Interestingly enough, the Government Accountability Office, or the GAO, issued a report this week that addressed in part PPP forgiveness. And that report found that the process to apply for forgiveness is more complex and more time consuming than it was to actually apply for the original loan. And I think as we're starting to work through this process, we're all figuring that out. Among other things, one of the things that the report indicated is that it could take anywhere from 3 hours to 15 hours to complete the application. That's a lot of time to complete a relatively short application and really just speaks to how complicated the process is. Now, the report did provide a number of recommendations, and we continue to hear discussion around streamlining the process. Unfortunately, there is no indication as to when or even if any changes will be made. We're also hearing from many of you that you want to move ahead and get your application submitted and get the forgiveness piece taken care of. And we completely get and understand that. And that's really why we're here today. So we're going to walk through as much as we can in the time that we have, but I also recognize that we probably will not be able to address every question that you may have. So we also want to make sure that there's additional resources available to help you. The SBA has put together a FAQ, and that is very good and would probably address a lot of the questions that you have. So this document is out on our website for you, and I would recommend that if after this call you have additional questions, to check that document out. It is 11 pages long, it is fairly user-friendly, and really does provide a lot of good information. Also on our website are detailed instructions for filling out both the easy application as well as the long form. Now, I'm not quite sure these are quite as user-friendly, but they can provide a lot of guidance on filling out the applications, and they really do contain a wealth of information. And then the final resource for you is really your advisor here at Alaris. So please reach out with questions, and we will do our very best to get back to you and get those questions answered. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand it back over to Carrie so she can walk you through some tips on how to complete an application.
Thank you, Debbie, for that. So in order to receive loan forgiveness, all borrowers will need to complete and submit a loan forgiveness application provided by Alaris. What does that mean? Alaris will be sending you a pre-filled DocuSign application to execute for forgiveness for your PPP funds. As you can reference on the screen, we will be completing your business legal name, address, your SBA PPP loan number, the loan amount, and then the date of disbursement. If for some reason any of these fields feel inaccurate to you, please reach out to your business advisor and we can correct them. For by chance, maybe there was a change of business address or location of occupancy, please feel free to reach out again to your advisor. We can correct these items and resend them out to you. If you are a payroll client of Alaris, unfortunately, we will not be pre-filling in any payroll information. The information that we will be pre-filling is limited to the information on the screen that you see today. In addition to the information you see on the screen, you or a representative of your business will need to complete the remaining fields and calculate the amount for eligibility. So the question is, how long will this take? And/or what is our process once we've submitted that application? Once you submit that application to Alaris, we have 60 days to decision that application. What does that entail for Alaris? We will be reviewing your documentation and your application that you've submitted to Alaris. We will be verifying that you have sufficient supporting documentation and that the application is complete and all summations and calculations are accurate. Alaris will not be going back and redoing your application line by line. We will be validating the information, the supporting information you provided to Alaris in conjunction with those figures that you filled out on your application. If for some reason we are missing a supporting documentation or have a question or need clarity on that application and those supporting documents, your advisor will reach out to you prior to submission to the SBA. Again, our goal, along with our borrower's goal, is to qualify you for full forgiveness for your PPP funds. Once Alaris has worked with you as the client and we know that we have a strong, complete application, we will then submit it to the SBA. The SBA does have 90 days to review the request and remit payment back to the bank. Again, we will receive your application, review, and then submit it along to the SBA. The SBA is doing its own independent review of those items that you've submitted to Alaris. Alaris is providing that supporting documentation to the SBA, and they will do their independent review outside of what Alaris's recommendation is. To start the process, you will need to determine whether we need to use an easy form or what we're referring to throughout this training today as the long form. The long form is just the complete application, whereas the easy form is a streamlined version of that application. So once we've determined that we need to start one of the forms, we can navigate to the LARIS cover letter that all borrowers are receiving in conjunction with that DocuSign application. The cover letter not only lays out those timeframes of completion that we just discussed, however, it also provides the qualifications to use for that easy form. In addition to that cover letter that you would have received from your business advisor in conjunction with that DocuSign application, the easy instructions that are provided on the LARIS website also outline those 3 scenarios which may qualify you for use of the easy form. Currently on the screen, these are the 3 scenarios in which would qualify you to utilize that easy form. Again, this reference is provided on the LARIS website, as well as the cover letter that you would have received with your DocuSign application. If you as the borrower can check one of these 3 boxes, you do not need to check all 3. If you can check one of the 3 boxes, you are eligible to utilize that easy form. So me as the borrower, I made that determination that yes, I can proceed using the easy form. I need to approach the application through the DocuSign and navigate my way to the upper right-hand corner, which is highlighted on the screen, and select that easy form. Please keep in mind that if you toggle back and forth between the easy form and the long form, there will be some content that is lost, as not all line items are applicable to both forms. Again, if I've chosen to use the easy form, I simply navigate to the top right-hand corner of that DocuSign application and select easy form.
So Carrie, this is Debbie.
Yes.
Maybe just to make sure it's clear for everybody on the call. So on the prior slide where you had showed the instructions for the 3 different options, if they check any one of those 3, then when they open up the application in the DocuSign document that they receive from us, they need to check that box in that upper right-hand corner to create the short form. And that's really important, I think, for everybody to understand, because otherwise it's going to take you through the long process, which is more complicated.
Thank you, Debbie, for that clarification. And just to reiterate, the form that you receive from DocuSign is convertible to both the long form and the easy form. And to Debbie's point, if you do not check that easy form box, the documentation in front of you will force you to fill out the long form. Proceeding on through the documentation, as referenced on the screen, you will see the pre-filled information that LARIS is providing to you. If you were in receipt of an economic injury disaster loan or EIDL loan, you will need to acknowledge and provide that advance amount and application number. Please keep in mind you are not providing the loan amount you were in receipt of, however, the advance amount. The advance amount received by you as the borrower will be deducted from the total forgiveness amount LARIS is recommending to the SBA. This is nothing you need to do throughout the application process. You do not need to deduct it yourself, and LARIS will not be deducting it. However, we do need to provide this information to the SBA. And as those funds are remitted to LARIS and credited to your loan, SBA will be reducing your forgiveness amount by that EIDL advance amount. Please also keep in mind that LARIS is not privy to that advance amount or that application number. That is unique to you as the borrower, and for security and privacy reasons, LARIS cannot reach out to the SBA on behalf of our borrowers, again, because we are not an obligor on that loan. So again, please fill out the advance amount and provide that application number. If, however, you need a resource or a number to call, your business advisor can help you and guide you in that direction.
And Carrie, do you want to maybe touch on just 1 minute before we move off of that screen on the EIDL loan? I know there's been some confusion and questions around the timing of when they would have gotten that EIDL loan and how that impacts forgiveness. So could you maybe speak to that for just a minute?
And just to clarify, Debbie, to make sure I'm understanding the question that you're asking, if you received your EIDL loan prior to a particular date, you may have had that amount refinanced into your PPP loan. If you had that loan refinanced into your PPP loan, you still need to provide that advance amount and that application number. We will have likely not refinanced that advance amount into your PPP loan, however, just your EIDL loan amount. Debbie, does that provide clarification for your question?
I think it does. It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Proceeding on, throughout the application, both the long form and the easy form, you will see reference to an full-time equivalent, or what they refer to as FTE. Throughout the actual application process in applying for PPP funds, this was a very vague statement. Throughout the forgiveness process, SBA has provided guidance on what an FTE or full-time equivalent means and how it should be calculated. There are two options that you as the borrower and applicant can decide on how to approach this calculation. The first is simply taking the average number of hours paid per week per employee and dividing it by 40. Again, you may result in a decimal place for your employees, and that's perfectly acceptable for this first calculation. The second method, you can either assign a 1 for all employees that worked 40 hours or more per week, and or assign 0.5 for employees who work fewer than 40 hours per week. Again, you as the borrower and the applicant can make the determination on which method you want to approach. The number that you calculate at the time of forgiveness will be compared to the selected reference period to determine if there's any reduction in your FTE count. Please keep in mind those reference periods will differ based on if you've elected to be a seasonal employer or non-seasonal employer. So what does that mean, and how do I fill my application out with that information? On the top portion of your application, you will see a line reference that references employees at time of loan application. Please keep in mind that any time that you see that reference or that word employees, they are referring to full-time equivalents. So at this time, we would take that opportunity to fill out the time of employees at the time of forgiveness based on that FTE methodology that we just discussed, whether method 1 or method 2. And then we want to be prudent and to ensure that we're comparing the same methodology from the time of application, which is when we received our PPP funds, to the time of forgiveness, which is when we're filling out our forgiveness application. We want to ensure that methodology is the same and correct. So you'd want to go back then to what you've determined as your reference period and calculate employees or FTEs at the time of your loan application using that same methodology. Again, you want to make sure your approach is similar in nature. If it is not, you may be accepting of an FTE reduction, which would influence the forgiveness amount prematurely. Again, our goal and our objective through this process is to recommend full forgiveness on all of our loan applications. So again, using method 1 or method 2 that was just discussed, we want to go ahead and navigate to that first page of the application. Please keep in mind that first page of the application where it references employees, that must be a whole number. If your calculation comes out to be 40.5, your employee count would be 40. Moving on, again, we talk about a covered period. And this again is applicable to both the easy form and the long form. The covered period is the time frame that eligible expenses can be counted towards forgiveness. Now, there are two options on the application, and you will see reference to a covered period and an alternative payroll covered period. Let's first start with and discuss what the covered period means. All applicants and or borrowers of the PPP program are required to fill in what we call a covered period. Now, you do have two options to choose from. You can either choose the 8-week option or the 24-week option. Please keep in mind it is the SBA's recommendation that if you've exhausted funds at week 9, 10, 11, etc., you are welcome to apply for forgiveness using the 24-week period prior to the conclusion of that 24-week period. So let's say I've exhausted my PPP funds, for example, at week 15. I am welcome to apply at week 15 for forgiveness. However, when entering in my covered period in my application, I would need to use the 24-week period. Again, that covered period will always start from the day the loan funds were dispersed. And that is one of those categories that Alaris is providing for you on your application. I'd like to take a minute just to discuss what an alternative payroll covered period is. Again, you will need to elect 8 or 24 weeks. Your election needs to match what your covered period is. For example, if I've chosen to use 8 weeks for my covered period, my alternative payroll covered period again would also be 8 weeks. They need to coincide. However, if I received my funds on a Wednesday, for example, and my payroll started that following Friday, I can elect to start my alternative payroll covered period for that following Friday. My covered period will always govern my non-payroll covered expenses. However, I can use a different covered period for my payroll, again, if my payroll potentially starts or ends on a day that doesn't coincide with my date of disbursement.
So Carrie, maybe just to review, and I think you're going to talk about it a little bit on this slide, but I know there's been a lot of confusion around the covered period and the 8 weeks versus the 24 weeks. And so if the client used the PPP funds over that 8-week period, the dates that they put in the application should match that 8-week period, correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Yep. And then if they used a 10-week period, they still should show a 24-week period, correct?
Absolutely. Anything that exceeds that 8-week period, you are communicating to the SBA that you are opting to use that 24 weeks. So again, you're welcome to apply prior to that 24 weeks. However, you still need to use that 24-week date range in your covered or your alternative covered period. Thank you, Debbie, for those questions and clarifications. Again, you will see on the screen, this is a portion of the application. You as the employer needs to elect your payroll cycle. Again, there's no influence on forgiveness based on what your election of your payroll cycle. This is just for reporting purposes to the SBA. You will need to elect one of the options and then again, navigate down to fill out that covered period. Again, that covered period is a required field to be filled in and should always begin with the date your funds were dispersed. The alternative payroll covered period is an optional field if you choose to elect to use a different covered period for your payroll only. So before we actually jump into the filling out and calculating our loan forgiveness, I'd like to take a brief moment to talk about what are covered expenses. Covered expenses for payroll are similar to those that you saw on the front side as you were working on applying for forgiveness, applying for PPP funds. Payroll is inclusive of compensation, which is salaries, wages, commissions, or similar compensation, which it would include tips. Again, for not all non-owners, there is that $100,000 cash compensation limit. You can also make payments for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, employee benefits, group health care coverage, insurance premiums, and retirement. Please keep in mind this is only inclusive of the employer's contribution and does not influence employees' contribution. So if my employee pays a portion of my insurance or they're in group insurance or contributes to their retirement plan out of their payroll, those items are not covered for forgiveness purposes. Payment of state and local taxes assessed on compensation are, and hazard pay and bonuses. I would like to take this time to make note that if I, as the employer, have employees that I pay an average salary of throughout the year, and I also pay a bonus on top of that salary, when I'm calculating any reduction to salaries or wages, I do not need to include bonuses for that reduction. Again, bonuses would not come into play for that 25% reduction. It is just based on your salaries and wages. Other non-payroll covered expenses would be inclusive of mortgage interest, rent, or utility payments. Mortgage interest, I'd like to expand on that just for a moment. Mortgage interest is also inclusive of any interest on loans secured by personal property. Again, that would be inclusive if I have an equipment loan or a vehicle loan, that interest can be included on forgiveness. However, if I have an operating line of credit or unsecured credit facility that I use for just general operations of my business, interest payments cannot be included for forgiveness purposes on those credit facilities. And again, just as a reminder, this is only interest. Any principal paid towards any loan type would not be eligible.
So Carrie, I want to just clarify one more time as we're talking about the different expenses that are eligible between payroll and non-payroll expenses, and then how that relates to the covered periods. So as you talked about on the prior slide, your covered period for payroll, you have two options. It can either be the covered period from the date you get your loan for the next 8 or 24 weeks, whatever you select, or you can use that alternative covered payroll. Now, if you choose to use an alternative payroll covered period, then your covered period for your other expenses is going to be different. So it is possible for you to have two different covered periods dependent on the type of expenses. Isn't that correct, Carrie?
That is correct, Debbie. And just to add clarity to that, as you're providing that supporting documentation, your supporting documentation then would need to align with either your covered or your alternative payroll covered period. So thank you, Debbie, for that clarification.
Yeah. And then just one other clarification, as you were talking through the expenses and we talk about uh, eligibility as far as benefits for like insurance premiums, that would cover things such as both health and dental, correct?
That is correct. Both health and dental are covered in that. And again, just to reiterate, that is only the employer's portion that is paid on behalf of the employee.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. So we've gone over now what can be considered as covered expenses. Now we need what supporting information do I need to provide as the business owner and recipient of PPP funds with my forgiveness application? Those payroll items that are required are similar in nature to those items that you provided on the front side when applying for your PPP funds. So payroll statements from your a third party payroll company, if you so choose to use one, my internal statements from my internal accounting software, supporting tax forms. And again, when I say supporting tax forms, they may have been forms that have already been sent in and executed and or a draft, because please keep in mind that that your covered period may end in the middle of a quarter. So again, it can be in draft form as well. You can provide canceled checks and or bank statements for your payroll. Non-payroll items is a little bit unique because again, we didn't utilize these items on the front side when we were applying for our PPP loan. So business mortgage interest, what would I need to provide for that? We would need to see a copy of the lender's amortization schedule to validate what the payment amount was, and or account statements, which would mean your bank account statements showing proof that payments were made, canceled checks, or a lender account statement. What is a lender account statement? If I receive a monthly invoice that breaks down principal and interest, I can provide that invoice as well, showing proof of payment in conjunction with account statements and or canceled checks. For rent or lease payments, we need to see a copy of the lease and or again, bank account statements or canceled checks showing proof of payment. Please keep in mind, we've provided this example from several of our clients. Let's say I've been in a building for 30 years. Do I need to provide my original lease agreement? The answer is both yes and no. If by chance you've executed a modification or a renewal of that lease and the bank can validate the original date and or that the lease agreement was in place on February 15th of 2020, shows the amount of payment owing and due each month, and has the borrower's information, i.e. name, you can feel free to provide a copy of that modification and or renewal of that lease. Again, we need to be able to validate, however, the monthly payment option as well as your information, and need to see that the lease was in place as of February 15th. In conjunction with that, we also need bank statements and canceled checks showing proof of payment. Similar for business mortgage interest, again, we need two forms of validation that was paid. Again, invoices for the eligibility period. I apologize, this is a duplicate. We're going to move on to what is required for utility statements. If I'm showing and submitting utility payments for forgiveness, I need to provide my potential invoice from my municipal and or utility company in conjunction with account statements and canceled checks. So how do I provide these items, these supporting items to Alaris with my application? You will see reference to a picture on the presentation today. Each of these items is an area for you to provide a supporting statement to Alaris. If by chance you have more than 7 supporting items, feel free to send those to your business advisor and we can upload those with your application as we move through the underwriting process. Again, each of those paper clips you see on the bottom of both the easy form and the long form will allow you to attach those supporting documentations to your DocuSign application. Navigating the easy form. Again, the easy form is a streamlined approach to the full forgiveness application. As referenced on the screen, we will now move into the computation part of the forgiveness. Again, the easy form, there are instructions for both the easy form and our long form reference on the Alaris website for your support. And always your business advisor is a great resource as well, along with that FAQ that has been provided by the SBA. So what we will do is we'll take all of our supporting documentation that we just discussed, and we will streamline it into an overview on the easy form application. Again, we will aggregate all of our payroll costs and enter that into line 1. And I would like to pause there to talk about payroll costs. If as you're going through your calculations and your computations of easy form, if you qualify for full forgiveness based on payroll cost, you can stop there. You do not need to enter mortgage interest, business rents or lease, or business utility payments. You can opt to qualify just on payroll costs alone. The benefit to you as the employer and the process overall is that there's less documentation to be provided to the bank and less documentation to be retained by you as an organization for that 6-year period after forgiveness is provided. So again, I will repeat, if you receive PPP loan and when you go to apply for forgiveness, if you qualify based on payroll costs as a standalone, you're welcome to not have to enter lines 2, 3, and 4. You can qualify for full forgiveness based on payroll costs. Additionally, if you opt to use lines 2, 3, and 4, you need to have at least 60% of your PPP loan forgiven based on payroll costs. Again, 60% of your PPP proceeds need to go to payroll costs. Again, we'll take all the rest of the supporting documentation and enter the lines 2, 3, and 4 for mortgage interest, business rent, and business utilities. Line 5 is a computation of those 4 lines. On line 6, we will strictly just enter our PPP loan amount, which is found on that first page that Alaris has provided you of that application. And line 7, that is a test that the SBA is performing to ensure that you've used at least 60% of your payroll of your PPP proceeds towards payroll. Once those 3 computations have been done, we will then compare lines 5, 6, and 7 for the lower of the 3 amounts. Again, ideally, it is our objective as your lender to provide full forgiveness or recommend full forgiveness on all PPP loans. What we will do then ideally is look towards that line 6 with anticipation that your loan amount should be the lower of all 3 amounts. The lower of all 3 lines, 5, 6, and 7, will be the amount Alaris recommends for forgiveness to the SBA. To take note, if you are applying, let's say at week 10, and you're opting to use the 24-week period, and you come through this computation and realize that you would not be eligible for full forgiveness, you are welcome to continue to wait throughout the process up until week 24 to apply. So keep in mind, if I'm filling this out as a business owner on week 10 of my covered period, and I realize that I do not have enough expenses to receive full forgiveness, I would recommend, again, using maybe an additional payroll period or moving further through those 24 weeks to ensure that you are eligible for full forgiveness.
And Carrie, maybe just to clarify an earlier comment that you had made, when you had talked about the fact that if payroll costs alone allow for the client to receive full forgiveness on their PPP loan, really we're recommending just include those payroll costs and not fill out lines 2, 3, and 4. Now that doesn't necessarily mean they had to use 100% of the PPP funds towards payroll. They could have used those for any of those qualified expenses. Just for application purposes, we're saying that if payroll costs are sufficient, it just saves both, I think, the clients as well as us in reviewing the information, some work in needing to provide the additional documentation. Is that correct?
That's correct, Debbie. And thank you for that clarification. That's absolutely correct. You could have exhausted your PPP funds for those items listed on lines 2, 3, and 4. However, if you have enough in payroll costs to support the forgiveness, we are recommending it does streamline the process both for you as the applicant and for the bank and the SBA to move through that application. So thank you, Debbie, for that clarification. Navigating further down within the easy form application, there are several items that you as the business owner or representative of the business needs to attest to. Please keep in mind that some of them are similar from the easy form to the long form. However, I would recommend reading through each line item and not just moving through and initialing all of them. I would like to call out these 2 items on the easy form, which we call safe harbors. These are both optional items that the borrower or PPP recipient or representative of the borrower can choose to initial. Again, both these items are safe harbor items potentially. And when I say safe harbor, SBA has recognized that there are situations and qualifications that are out of the borrower's control. Again, potentially was my staff reduced. However, it was reduced because I had natural retirements. Again, out of the hands of the borrower. And the SBA recognizes those and wants to provide credit for our PPP applicants based on those safe harbors. So please take note that if you are using the easy form, there are 2 optional certifications that you can choose to use. Again, they are optional. It could be one, it could be both, or it could be neither. So navigating away from the easy form, I'm going to now discuss the long form or the complete application. The complete application or long form looks and feels just a little bit differently and has different requirements and supporting documentation that you may opt to use. If you take reference to the presentation, you will see a picture of the PPP Schedule A worksheet. Please keep in mind that the Schedule A worksheet is not included in the DocuSign application you will receive from Alaris. This is not also required to come back to Alaris as a supporting document. You can choose to send it back if you want, however, it's not required. The Schedule A worksheet, however, can be found as reference on the Alaris website. You are welcome to use the form the SBA has provided or your equivalent. You may have accounting software or internal software or create your own Excel documentation that's similar in nature. Again, that is up to you as the borrower and as the forgiveness applicant to either choose to use the SBA Schedule A worksheet or create equivalent worksheet that will help you through your computations. The Schedule A worksheet is there to support you in calculating your average FTE if you've reduced and or calculate total FTE and help you calculate that if there were any salary or hourly wage reductions. Please keep in mind as you calculate that average FTE and or any salary or hourly wage reduction, that needs to be done on a per employee basis. Again, I need to calculate whether there's any reductions on a per employee basis, not overall for all my employees. Once I've completed that Schedule A worksheet or an equivalent that you have as a business owner have come up with yourself, you are welcome then to move to the forgiveness application or long form. I would recommend navigating down to Schedule A. Again, you will see the top portion of what Schedule A looks like. It's we're all very habit-forming people. We like to start with the top and work our way down. In this scenario, once you get to the computation portion of the long form, I would recommend navigating down to Schedule A once you've completed that Schedule A worksheet and working through Schedule A. I recommend this as the boxes within Schedule A and those items that you will be filling out will then pre-fill up to your summary page of your long form application. Again, the first 3 items are asking you to navigate and pre-fill in what you've already completed on that Schedule A worksheet. You're entering the total cash compensation of box 1 from your Schedule A worksheet. That's asking you, Schedule A, Table 1 is outlining all employees that were paid $100,000 or less on an annual basis. So again, you're going to calculate those items, both your FTE and your cash compensation for those employees who made less than 100,000 on average. Line 3 is asking you if there are any reductions for employees that were less than 100,000. Please keep in mind that if you've calculated a reduction for any of your employees that was greater than that 25%, which is an allowable reduction, you need to then take that amount, that weekly amount that you've calculated, and carry it over the full 24-week period. Even if you are applying at week 10, 11, or 12, if you recognize and have not restored your employees to that 75% or greater of their salary or wage prior to your covered period and or reference period, you need to take that amount that you've calculated for any reduction and amortize it over the full and calculate it over the full 24 weeks. So if I'm applying at week 10 and I recognize there's a $100 reduction per week, I can't just use 10 weeks. I need to use the full 24 weeks for my total reduction amount. Continuing on with Schedule A, the next portion is what we're going to talk about is the non-cash compensation payroll costs. Similar to what you did on the EZ form, you are now going to enter the employer contribution amount for insurance, retirement, and then state and local taxes. Please keep in mind as well as you enter that amount in for both on the EZ form and the long form for retirements, it is retirement that the employer is paying on behalf of the employee, and it cannot be an accelerated amount. For instance, if I want to add additional compensation from a retirement standpoint for my employee, it has to be on a normally scheduled basis. I cannot accelerate the amount for the entire year during my covered period. The final component to the Schedule A on this side that I would like to discuss is compensation to owners. Depending on the type of, depending on the type of business, whether it be a partnership, an S Corp, or a C Corp, will determine the maximum amount that compensation to owners can be included for the forgiveness application. Additionally, if I am an owner of 10 businesses, that cap is applicable to a summation of all 10 businesses. So if 10 of my businesses have received PPP funds and my total compensation for the year is $10,000, I can either choose to apply that $10,000 to one of my forgiveness applications, or I can apply $1,000 to each of the 10 forgiveness applications. Again, that cap for each business owner is a summation of all applications or all borrowers that receive PPP funds. That's an aggregate total. It does not say that I can apply that amount per forgiveness application. Calling attention to line 10, we will then move through the summation line, and I apologize, this has been corrected. The blue box is being covered slightly. However, Alaris is moving through and calculating lines 4, 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10 or 9 for you. Again, the amount in the blue box will be the summation total. It is then the expectation of our borrower to validate that with their own numbers and enter that into the red box on that same line. We talked briefly before about what safe harbor means, and again, the SBA recognizes that there are items that are out of the control of the borrower, and they want to recognize that they should not be penalized for those items. So again, we're referring to those as safe harbors. This is the bottom of Schedule A for the long form application. Once we've filled in and we've calculated all of our qualified expenses, we then need to go move through these safe harbors. If you can check or satisfy any of these next 3 items, you would then navigate to line 13 and enter 1. And by entering 1, it's saying that I, as the borrower, have either attempted to rehire, maybe an FTE reduction, or I have not reduced any of my employee salaries and wages. Again, reading through the safe harbors, if you can check any of those 3 boxes, you qualify for that safe harbor. If you cannot check those 3 boxes, we would then need to navigate to line 11, and then we would need to enter our average FTE during the chosen reference period. So during my chosen reference period, I had 500 employees. My total average FTE count as of this application is 450. By not electing one of those safe harbors, I, as the business owner, am attesting that I knowingly furloughed 50 employees from an FTE count and did not try to hire them back or bring them back prior to the end of my covered period. Again, the summation under line 13, Alaris will do the calculation for you. It is then the business owner or applicant's responsibility to validate that number and enter that number into the red box. Again, several line items.
Hey, Carrie, maybe before we move off of that, can we just clarify one item on the safe harbor provision? So if a business was unable to operate due to an executive order from the state, does that allow them to be applicable for safe harbor provision?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. I'll call attention to safe harbor number 1. If for some reason there was an executive order based on health concerns from any of the Centers of Disease Control, Secretary of Health and Human Services, you would then elect safe harbor number 1. Again, SBA is recognizing that there are items out of the control of the business owner that should not penalize your eligibility for full forgiveness. Thank you, Debbie, for that clarification. Moving on, as we look back to page 1 of our long form forgiveness, we will now take those items that we filled out on Schedule A and carry them forward to an overview and to finalize our application. You will see the reference box in blue. Anywhere on this first page that references PPP Schedule A, those items will automatically pre-fill based on the information that you entered into Schedule A. Please keep in mind that if you enter a hard number, let's say I as the applicant filled out Schedule A and I came back and I wiped out the $1,040,000 and I put $500,000 there, it will not the summation that Alaris has provided within the DocuSign application will not overwrite what you type into the box individually. Again, anytime there's reference, for example, on line 1, line 5, and line 7s to Schedule A, they will automatically pre-fill based on the information you entered into that Schedule A application. So again, we're going to move through similar to what we did on the EZ form. We are going to fill out lines 2, 3, and 4. Once again, if you qualify based on payroll costs alone for full forgiveness, there is no need to fill lines 2, 3, and 4. You're welcome just to enter a 0. However, if you do not qualify for full forgiveness based on payroll, it is obviously encouraged to fill out lines 2, 3, and 4 to ensure you have the best possible opportunity to qualify for full forgiveness. Lines 2, 3, and 4 are similar to that of the EZ form. The requirements and line items have not changed. The supporting documentation has not changed either. Navigating down to line 5, again, that is a computation of lines 1 through 4. Line number 6 now is a change from the EZ form. Line number 6 walks you through and adds up payroll costs, mortgage interest, business rent, and utility payments that are of those covered expenses. However, if you have any salary or hourly wage reductions, that's calculated per employee and carried out the full volume of weeks of your chosen covered period, it will deduct that amount as we add up line 6. So again, line 6 is the computation of lines 1 through 4, and then that reduction of any salary or hourly wage on line 5. Again, me as the business owner calculated that I knowingly furloughed 50 employees without cause. So again, I had a reduction to my FTE reduction or FTE quotient. Line 7 is going to outline that. So then we move on to line 8. It's going to take line 6, which again reflects that reduction in any salary or hourly wage, and takes into account any FTE reduction that were not covered with the safe harbors. Once I come down to that line item number 8, again, my forgiveness amount is going to be indicative of the lower of lines 8, 9, and 10. Again, line 10 as a reiteration is simply a test that the SBA is performing to ensure that at least 60% of PPP proceeds were used towards payroll. So me as the applicant would then choose the lower of lines 8, 9, and 10, and that would be my recommended forgiveness amount. At this time, we've concluded filling out both the easy and the long form. And I just have a few items to note before we end our training for the day. Some additional information as we move through the application. Similarly, on both the easy form and the long form, if you, together with any affiliated entities, received over $2 million in PPP proceeds, you will need to make note of that on the very first page of the application. There is a different review process that the SBA is moving through for those individuals and or individuals with affiliates that received over $2 million in PPP proceeds. Again, as a reiteration, there are several line items or statements that you as the borrower or representative of the company need to certify to. Please read them carefully. There are some that are optional items. Again, there are some that are optional items that don't need to be initialed, and please only initial those items that are applicable to your business. PPP documents, again, your forgiveness application and any supporting documents. In addition to, on both the easy form instructions and the long form instructions, there are documents that you as the business owner need to retain, however, don't need to provide to the bank. Everything must be retained for 6 years after the loan is forgiven or repaid in full. And again, just to reiterate Debbie's initial comment, all of the supporting instructions and updated FAQs and the Schedule A worksheet are all available on the LARS website. If for some reason you're struggling to find any of that information, your business advisor is always a great resource. We ask that you reach out to your business advisor, and they can go ahead and help you navigate to where those items are located on our website.
And Carrie, maybe before we navigate past that additional information page, just a couple of additional clarifications. There may be some clients on the call today that have not received their DocuSign application from us. Can you just speak to that process a little bit?
Absolutely. Those DocuSign applications are unique to each of our clients and are customized for each of our clients. We will continue over the course of the next several weeks providing the recipients of those PPP DocuSign applications. You should be receiving those over the next week or several weeks. Again, it's up to the business advisor to ensure that they are customized for you and they are providing as much support as possible. So please look for those DocuSign applications from your business advisor over the next week or so. If for some reason you are not seeing that application come to you from your business advisor, please feel free to reach out to your advisor for that further support. Again, those are all customized to each PPP recipient.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Carrie. And just for the individuals and the participants on the call, really to help us manage the process, just due to the sheer volume of applications that need to be processed, we are sending these out in batches. So just because you haven't received your DocuSign application yet, you should, as Carrie mentioned, be seeing that in the near future. And then I know, Carrie, you mentioned it at the top, but just for clarification, we will be posting a recording of this on our website, correct?
Thank you, Debbie, for that. Yes, once the training is concluded today, we will be posting that on our website, as well as providing a copy to those individuals that have signed up today.
Okay.
Any other questions, final questions, Debbie, or clarifications?
I think the other thing is we have been getting a few questions coming in, and, because of the questions that we're getting coming in, a lot of them are just very specific to individual situations. And we want to make sure that we help you with your individual questions and your individual situation. From a time standpoint, we unfortunately don't have time to go through all of these questions on today's call, but we will take any questions that have come in through the Q&A and make sure that we get back to you or your business advisor gets back to you to follow up with you on those specific questions that you did have.
Thank you, Debbie, for that. And that has concluded our training for today. And I just do want to reiterate, the PPP forgiveness process is very unique to each PPP recipient. And we do encourage you to reach out to your business advisor with any questions. We really want to customize those responses and ensure we're getting the most accurate information for your specific topic and or situation. With that, the training has concluded. Debbie, would you like to conclude?
Absolutely. Thank you, Carrie. And you know, that was a lot of great information and it's a lot of detail. And I know we covered a lot of information in a relatively short period of time, and that when we're looking at it on kind of isolation in some of these slides, it can be a little bit confusing. So, you know, as a reminder, you know, please check out the resources that are available on our website, both the SBA FAQ as well as the detailed instructions. They really will help you kind of walk through this application. And then in addition, as Carrie mentioned, please reach out to your advisor if you have additional questions. And then finally, I just want to say thank you again. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your patience. This program has been phenomenal in so many ways and has really provided some much needed liquidity to so many companies. But it has not been without its challenges. So please know that we are here to help, and that we will work through this with you and get through this together. So thank you for attending today and have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.